when I saw NFTs and I saw, oh, right, so you're taking intellectual property, whether it's art or music or computer code or whatever else, and you're fixing it into this token, into this software thing that is immutable and provably it's a digital object, something you can own, but it's digital. And for me, again, just marrying the intellectual property interest with the cryptocurrency interest, the key one for me, right, was like I grew up as a kid collecting baseball cards, collecting basketball cards. I saw NBA Top Shot. And I was like, man, if I were like a 13-year-old kid now and there were digital basketball cards that I could flip for like hundreds of dollars, like that's what I would be doing 100%. This is genius. This is going to be the future of collecting.
Welcome to another episode of On Record PR. I'm the executive producer and guest host, Jennifer Simpson Carr. Today I'm going on record with Moish Peltz, partner at Falcon Rappaport Berkman. Moish is a member of the firm's executive committee, co-chair of the Digital Assets Practice Group, and also leads the intellectual property practice. He has over a decade of experience in IP and business law, including at the intersection of blockchain technology, where he has advised businesses since 2014. Moish is also the co-host of the Block and Order podcast, a show that breaks down the latest legal news in blockchain and technology. Moish, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. It is exciting for me to chat with a fellow podcast host.
Same here. The feeling is mutual.
I've really enjoyed listening to you and getting to know more about your work. And I find your episodes really engaging and organic. So thank you for putting that great content out in the market.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
So to set the stage for our conversation, can you give our audience an overview of your practice and how you support clients?
Yeah, so you had a very nice introduction there, but I spend about a third of my time, I'll say, in three different buckets. One of which is, my background and what I grew up learning, which is intellectual property, trademark prosecution, litigation, things of that nature, very traditional practice in a sense. The second bucket is the digital assets practice, which is perhaps a little less traditional, although we're supporting a lot of the traditional things that our firm does, whether it's trust and estates, tax, corporate litigation. It's helping clients with a focus on technology, blockchain, NFTs, whatever it may be, consume legal services that are customized for their industry, and understanding the wrinkles that type of business has, and then making sure that the legal services we're providing match their needs. So that's the second bucket. The third bucket being, as you mentioned, on the executive committee and thinking, all these issues, including digital assets and AI and all sorts of, new and fun stuff, and making sure that our firm, as we grow, we're contemplating all this stuff and we're learning it holistically across the entire organization and implementing best practices. So that's what a lot of what I spend my time on at the executive committee.
I'm excited for this conversation because you are working in areas that have been hot topics and remain hot topics. But I know that your firm has also been a leader and an innovator in these emerging spaces. So let's start with financial technology, particularly cryptocurrencies. Such a hot topic. It has been for many years, continues to be. And for law firms, which are typically risk adverse, there are many considerations: security, compliance, clients' expectations, and kind of balancing all of those things. How should law firms approach the question of accepting cryptocurrency as payment? And what factors need to guide their decision-making?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I really think, and I'll say here, if there's any law firm principle that's like, man, I really want to accept cryptocurrency, but I'm scared or I don't know where to start, contact me. I'd love to talk with you about it. I think every law firm, just there was a time when law firms didn't accept credit cards and then all of them did because that's how people want to pay for stuff. We're not quite there with crypto. But the reality is we have clients that say, I have a ton of crypto. You have a lot of legal services. Can I pay for your legal services with crypto? And the entrepreneur in me says, of course you can. That's how you want to pay. I'm going to support that just as I would support someone wanting to pay with a credit card or a check or a wire or whatever it may be. In fact, I think for a lot of, especially if you think about clients that are not in the United States, paying across international borders can be quite tricky. So I think and even credit card fees are now typically 2-3+% fee. So there's a lot of problems that the technology just solves if you implement them correctly and ethically. So look, there's different ways you can do it. You can accept crypto directly, which is not something I would recommend any novice do. And also there's ethical kind of guidance that different state bars have promulgated, guidance about how to and how not to do it. For example, if you're holding Bitcoin in trust and the client gives it to you when it's $50,000 and in the past month it's gone up to $100,000, so I would recommend not having exposure to exchange rate fluctuations in trust. So there's things like that you could basically you can find technological tools that make it super easy for anyone to accept crypto just as they would a credit card or some other payment mechanism.
So it's interesting, and it's one of a few areas you work in. And there's so much I want to talk to you about. So I want to get to artificial intelligence. It's another area that has made such a mark in the world in recent years, particularly over the last 24 months. For anyone following the news, that includes the legal industry. So from streamlining documents to enhancing client service, it's really starting to reshape how firms work generally, but also clients' expectations for their outside counsel in how they deliver those services. So can you talk about how AI is impacting the client service and the delivery of services in the legal industry?
Yeah, look, I think if you sit down and you use some of these AI tools, I'm putting aside legal practice for now. If you just sit down and use ChatGPT Pro, or you use Anthropic's Claude or Perplexity or some of these top tools, it's very clear that they do certain tasks at a human level, or they make a human who is perhaps an underperformer a better performer, or they make a human that is a really top performer an even more efficient performer. So to say, okay, that's cool, the technology does all these things, but it's not applicable to the practice of law, seems ridiculous. It's very clear that these tools are going to drive efficiencies in the way that professional service providers think and provide services and contemplate and do all the things that a lawyer or an accountant or a financial advisor, whatever it may be, it's going to have an impact. I think we're still very early in how does a law firm use those tools in a way that they're comfortable with data privacy questions, they're comfortable with how their employees and staff are using the products in a way which deliver better outcomes versus just using it as a shortcut and producing results that get filed to the court that end up in the New York Times. And then I think that the big part is how do firms implement in a way which fundamentally increases revenue, increases profits, delivers a better work product, drives efficiencies for both the client and for the law firm. And I think that last piece is something that you don't hear a lot of people talking about publicly, but we're thinking a lot about all those things. We've piloted a ton of different software, and we're thinking really strategically about how we're implementing these things going forward.
So I'm curious, going back to the risk adverse nature in legal, and knowing that instances that have happened that have appeared in the New York Times can rattle or scare people even more, professionals even more, and, kind of pique that risk adversity that they have. How do you, as a member of your firm's executive committee, communicate internally the balance between, continuing to move forward with innovation in an ethical and mindful way so that you are helping differentiate your firm and providing that great client service, but also maintaining your, ethical considerations and really helping people feel confident and encouraged that this is a great direction to go?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think this is something, and one of the real reasons I love being at my firm is because my partners and the people that we work with really embody that entrepreneurial spirit. And so we're starting on this issue from kind of the way I framed it is it's clear that these tools do incredible things. It's clear that they need to be implemented into legal work streams. So how do we get there? What are the problems we need to solve? For sure, one of the biggest problems is data privacy, obtaining client consent, acting in an ethical manner, making sure that clients understand the risks and are signed off on those, and we understand the risks and we feel confident. So we have these conversations internally amongst our executive team. We have these conversations with, external consultants we rely on both for technology and for, ethical compliance, including counsel. We have an internal general counsel. It's saying, from a business perspective, here's where we think things are going. How do we put that together in a way that everyone feels comfortable? So look, it doesn't happen overnight. We've been working really hard addressing all these questions, including reaching out to clients and saying, hey, how would you feel if we use this product on this matter, and getting their buy-in and showing them look, here's how this can be done more efficiently. That's going to benefit you. But also we need to take all your data and put it into this tool. How does that make you feel? Right. So it's having those conversations. We've been piloting things like that. We've been putting policies and procedures in place, and we've been, talking internally and externally about how we can best utilize these tools while maintaining data privacy, ethical compliance, and all these other things that we need to from a risk mitigation perspective. And really that's kind of what we see, as something that our firm is uniquely positioned to challenge. And we're just fundamentally think that technology is so great and beneficial that if implemented correctly, it's going to drive better client outcomes. So thinking, we're not there today, but thinking long term, I think you'd be missing out. And I think law firms are going to start to feel that FOMO. And whether you're at, an AmLaw 20 or you're a solo, I think there's going to be a lot of conversations about how do I implement the right technology for me to achieve these kinds of outcomes, because you can't just turn a blind eye to technology, right? If you're still, responding to client correspondence by handwritten letter, sorry, you've missed the boat, right? So it's balancing the technological improvement with the business requirements of running a modern law practice with our ethical restrictions and all the data privacy things that go along with that.
I've heard a really interesting theme of transparency, both in your internal communications and discussions, and also externally. I love that you're talking to clients about, what they want to see. I think so often I think law firms historically will make decisions without really integrating the feedback from clients who we serve or who the law firms serve. And we're hearing from GCs, they're really interested in having these conversations and piloting. So that's amazing. And I can see now why the firm is in the position it is in terms of its innovation and kind of forward-thinking approach. Moish, we're going to pause here from a message from our sponsor, and then we'll be back in just a second.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses internationally. With an expert team of professionals positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by international affiliates, Furia Rubel enhances its clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams with media relations, media and crisis training, and client and talent acquisition and retention. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So we're back from our sponsor message, and I noticed in your bio that you have a number of hobbies, including the saxophone, which is my absolute favorite instrument. But I also noticed that you collect NFTs. And so this is, again, another area where there has been such a rise in kind of an area that's uncharted and has disputes in intellectual property, regulatory uncertainty, and they're not going away. So I'm just curious, first of all, what your interest is, but also what should businesses know to proactively address kind of some of these challenges I mentioned in this changing NFT Web3 space, and what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm not at my home office today. Otherwise, you'd see my saxophone sitting behind me. And really, that's how I got into intellectual property in the first place is through my love of music. And I actually worked in the entertainment industry before I went to law school. And even during law school, I had some music and then music adjacent work experiences and kind of landed at intellectual property. And for NFTs, for me, that's where, I just in parallel came across blockchain and Bitcoin and some other things like that. I was like, oh, that's cool. I don't think I really got it at the time. Otherwise, I would have bought a lot more. As I mentioned, the price has gone up insanely. But when I saw NFTs and I saw, oh, right, so you're taking intellectual property, whether it's art or music or computer code or whatever else, and you're fixing it into this token, into this software thing that is immutable and provably it's a digital object, something you can own, but it's digital. And for me, again, just marrying the intellectual property interest with the cryptocurrency interest, the key one for me, right, was like I grew up as a kid collecting baseball cards, collecting basketball cards. I saw NBA Top Shot. And I was like, man, if I were like a 13-year-old kid now and there were digital basketball cards that I could flip for like hundreds of dollars, like that's what I would be doing 100%. This is genius. This is going to be the future of collecting. It's collecting. Like, I don't want a shoebox of thousands of cards that someone's like, where is that? Oh, it's in an attic. I don't know. It's all musty. It's gone bad. Like, no, this is something you can collect on the internet, like all the other things you collect in your digital life. And there it is. And oh, by the way, if someone wants to buy a Michael Jordan rookie card from you, you don't have to go like into a box and find out it's bent and warped and been ruined and now it's only worth 5,000 instead of 30,000. No, you can just like sell it on the blockchain to someone in a country across the world. So I thought all that, putting that all together, just the future of like digital ownership, the future of intellectual property. And so once that clicked for me, probably 2019, 2020, that's when I got into like, all right, our firm needs to have some competencies around this. Let's open a practice group. And really that happened because clients and prospective clients were coming to me, like, hey, you're an IP attorney. Can you help me figure out this NFT thing? And I was like, yeah, sure. So, look, I think it's super fascinating. Even just talking about it now, it gets me really excited. It's one of those things where, crypto is so volatile, where the prices go down and people kind of leave the industry for dead. And that's when all the crazy people just ignore all that, take the price out of their head and just go back to work and build more cool stuff. And so now we're in this era where the prices are going back up, people are paying attention, but wouldn't you know it, there's some people that have been building cool new stuff for the past 3 years that you've never heard about. And once that hits the market and people start learning about it, trying new things, building next generation technology and marrying that with IP and consumer products, stuff gets really cool.
That's amazing. And I noticed also in your bio that you work with a lot of emerging companies, entrepreneurs, startups, and certainly intellectual property is critical for many of these companies as they're kind of launching or getting off the ground to maintaining a competitive edge or securing future funding or growth. So what strategies can entrepreneurs and startups use to protect their IP in an area that's changing so rapidly?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid concern. And I think it really depends on the company and what they're trying to do and the scale and the risk tolerances. But I would say basically every company, every venture technology company should have an IP strategy and should have, as part of their team, someone that's thinking about that, whether it's internally or an external, legal advisor. And so that's what we're called on to do a lot is with these early stage companies is help them, develop a strategy for, look, we haven't raised a seed round even yet, but here's what we're thinking. And here's all the things we're going to need to execute our vision down the road. What can we do today to make sure that we're able to grow into that? And, as you'll often hear from attorneys, the earlier you can have that conversation, help them set themselves up for success, the more likely it is that when they grow into that, either it's larger funding or larger consumer platform or whatever it may be, that they're, instead of like, oh no, this is an emergency, we never did this, it's okay, we've been preparing for this. Now is the stage where we do this, whether it's file a trademark, go get some patents, license agreements, things like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think for every stage company, it's really figuring out, not just intellectual property, but like, I have this conversation with entrepreneurs all the time. Like, you need to form an entity, you need to have an operating agreement. Like, you and your partner are like 70-30 owners of this thing, but there's no document that says that anywhere. That might be a problem if things don't go exactly as you plan, or even if they do. So yeah, it's a lot of it's just education and talking to people and making sure that they're setting themselves up for success.
So we've talked about so many emerging areas, hot topics. I'm curious, since we're wrapping up 2024 and we're looking ahead to the new year, what trends are you seeing? What are you expecting you expect to come down the pike? What are you helping your clients prepare for?
Yeah, look, we mentioned AI before in the discussion. I think from my perspective, that's the biggest theme for law firms in the next year is, how they're implementing AI, how they're driving efficiencies using the technology, what that means for the business of law. I think it's going to be hard to overstate how important that point's going to be. I think for law firms as a whole, I think the AI part is part of this conversation, but it obviously touches on a lot of other points. Is we're this mid-sized law firm, and really defining what that means relative to the very, very large firms, which seem to be increasingly consolidating, and very, very small boutique firms that may have like really, really strong, knowledge of like one vertical, but have maybe aren't so wide. I think for us, it's figuring out, and for firms like us, really proving out that mid-market and showing clients and prospective clients and general counsel the value proposition of that, especially when you have a firm like ours that's tech-enabled and doing things, what we think at a really, really high, level, but also really efficiently without the overhead of being an extremely large law firm. And I think you only have to look at the accounting space and the consolidation that's happening there on the accounting consulting side to think through, legal's different and there's different rules about firm ownership and things of that nature. But when you just look at like the trend of what's happening on the accounting side and thinking about, what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years on the legal side, it's interesting, it's exciting, it's also kind of scary. So it's a really fun point to be thinking about the business of law from our standpoint.
That's awesome. And you've given our listeners a lot to think about. I wish we had a couple of hours because I would have taken a deeper dive into each of these. It's so interesting to me. And I'm fascinated that this is kind of the work that you do every day are these areas that are so fast moving and kind of ahead of the game, particularly in the law firm space. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. I encourage you to visit our website, onrecordpr.com, and subscribe to the show. Check out our show notes and all of the information that we have available for you. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks so much for having me on.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Željko Tomic of Compost Media Flow.